Chip Kelly. I'm with the Tennessee Valley Beekeepers Association, and we have joined together with Cumberland County Beekeepers Association and the Roane Morgan Beekeepers to bring these seminars to you. Well, tonight's speaker is Barry Bolling. He's from Douglasville, Georgia. I heard Barry give a presentation on queen, let me get this right, queen hotels, not queen castles, at the Georgia Beekeepers Convention, and was very impressed. I thought that's something we could all benefit from. We've been doing a lot of presentations on queen raising because that's how we get local bees and as Michael Palmer said, sustain ourselves, make our apiary sustainable where we're not buying bees, we're making our own queens, and we can really advance the plight of the honeybee in our areas if we do this. So without further ado, Barry, if you want to share your screen and bring your presentation up, it's all yours.
Yeah, my name is Barry. I am an engineer. I went to Georgia Tech, and I'm a little obsessive. I started in beekeeping in December of 2012 with a kit to build my first hive. And that wasn't an accident. I wanted to do that since I was about 10 or 12 years old. I used to watch Georgia PBS television. And in the afternoons, they had things like how to play banjo. I didn't have a banjo. How to keep bees. I didn't have bees. I still don't have a banjo. And then Hee Haw came on. So we had to be quiet. But my dad and I watched the queen rearing series with the UGA Honeybee Lab. One of the professors there, one of the entomologists, and those videos are still around. In fact, Keith Delaplane is on YouTube. It's fun to see those guys. Those are from the 70s. Those videos are from the 70s. I think that the first beekeeper entomologist, he reminded me a lot of Tim Conway from Dorf Does Golf. You're all muted, so you can't laugh at that, but I appreciate that you probably are laughing. Anyway, I learned a lot, and I used to study the Sears and Roebuck catalogs, and this is what I'm telling you here. So this is me standing next to an observation hive. I started doing public service. I was a little reluctant to get into clubs just yet, and the clubs started here. I'm getting more involved just because I have young children, but they're getting older and they'll do this with me. So nearby is the most frequented state park in the whole state of Georgia, and it's a very well-kept park. And they have a nature center there with stuffed bears and everything in it, and a lot of programs. So at times I'm one of the programs. I never had a big draw there, but I did have, I did meet enough people that got me in front of other audience. So I have 2 observation hives, and they actually were open to a permanent observation hive. I just haven't had the initiative to do it yet. But they want an indoor hive on the wall there, and it may happen one day. So I also had a program called A Queen on 2 Frames. I always knew that boxing up a queen and putting her in a box with attendants was just a real pain in the honey. And I bought all that stuff, and then I kind of didn't like it. My preferred way to move a queen was take 2 frames with the cell or with the queen and just move her where I wanted. And that's very reliable. So for new beekeepers in my area, West Georgia, and some not so near, I gave away a lot of bees, two frames and a queen. And the guys at the UGA Honeybee Lab, they said, "What made you think of that?" And I said, "It's like friendship cake, the sourdough bread starter thing." I said, it's just goodwill towards other men. So there you go. There's a bit about Barry. And so this is my 9th season. I really think the beekeeping season starts in the fall. The best books state that it does, because there's so much important stuff you have to do in the fall, like treat for mites. But anyway, January kicks off my 9th calendar year of beekeeping. I'm not going to read this outline to you. We did about Barry. We're going to do what, when, and why. I've introduced a couple of new slides on inbreeding from a study I found in Sweden. That was one of the questions I got asked that I couldn't answer very well. Then we're going to talk about equipment. This is actually a very equipment-centric method. You need this box. You need this queen hotel. And the queen development calendar. And then 3 methods that I use to create a queen or to move a queen into the box if I decide to do that. What to do with your queens. Just one slide on that. If you have too many queens, how to handle that. I kind of have the lazy man's approach there, but it's great to help out fellow beekeepers. Problems that you can encounter, that's mostly robbing. And then the last few slides are going to be about modifications to this commercially available or home-built queen hotel. And then a conclusion and questions. So we're going to talk about raising queens. It is actually going to be quite a bit about the equipment. So I started with some nukes on the driveway, just 5-frame nukes. Then I kind of got greedy. I wanted them to make honey for me, and I wanted them to be stable, especially towards the end of summer, because I learned to manipulate frames. That means borrow eggs, borrow cells, capped cells or not. I learned all the advantages of moving things around, and I built up a really strong bee yard in my second season. 20 colonies, 20 hives, really too many for one location. But that's how it went. And then I finally bought a queen hotel. Well, I didn't buy my first queen hotel. I'll show you one here in a moment. I had a buddy that nearby came and saved my butt, my first month of beekeeping. Both the queens were dead, couldn't be found. They were a nuke, not a package. And he came over and he helped me. I ordered some queens. He got me started, and he loaned me this queen hotel. I'll show you a picture of it in a moment. So anyway, at the end of raising a queen on 2 frames, that actually is a nucleus. That's better. The longer she stays in there and lays, the industry rule of thumb for a hobbyist is let her lay for 21 days. I know that's a long time, but by the end of 21 days, she's got her own offspring in there and some drones on the way. So she's a nucleus for my purposes. She's not quite a nucleus until she has her own drones hatching out. But at the end of a month, certainly a queen on 2 frames would be a nucleus. And that's the strongest thing you have in your bee yard. If you want to do manipulations, you can borrow from the nucleus, you can move the nucleus, you can help a friend that's had a failure. And there's a lot of that now. There's a lot of new beekeepers running 1 hive, 1 colony, and they're struggling to get through the winter, as you know. So that's the what. Here's the why. Maybe I already said it. You need queens. In fact, queens at one time, before I became a beekeeper, they in some cases lived to be 5 years old. And in my 9 years, I don't think I've had a bee go past about 18 months. And when you ask the honeybee lab, they don't give you a hard answer, but it's the synergy of the toxins, insecticide, pesticide, herbicide, the nicotinoids, and the environment, and the mites with the viruses. That's the big 3. The poisons, the mites, the viruses, environment. But that's why you need queens. They're under a lot of stress. In fact, after several years, the comb that you maintain for her has pesticides in it that build up. The comb is the womb of the hive, and it does accumulate bad stuff. They go in there and they clean it, but they can't clean it all out. So that stuff's in the wax, and you're raising your bees in it. There's studies on that and how that affects the wax, right? And how it affects the baby bee. But if you run a queen hotel, you're going to want spare parts, and that's what you get. I have left queens in the queen hotel all summer, and then swapped out frames in case they get honey bound. I'll put in empty frames and keep her laying. If I have a weak colony, I'll borrow eggs. I don't move the queen. It's a low risk thing just to move the eggs. Let her keep laying. So you just get spare parts. It's not just queens. You get any part you need. And it's a low investment. So the return on investment is quite high. A queen shipped to your door is about $45. And I fell flat on my face my first month as a beekeeper. I had to buy 2 of them. And I decided I need to learn how to do this. So again, you're raising nucleuses, and you can borrow from the nucleus to help your other bees and help your other friends. My strongest queens happen in April and May and early June and June. After that, it's not experimental. It might be regional too. I'm in West Georgia. I'm not on crops. I don't have sourwood near me. So things really quit blooming very hard in early June here. You can drive around and see a few sourwood trees here. This is actually technically the range of sourwood, but it's not enough to sustain a colony. So the reason queens are the best, and this is the easiest, they're prone to reproduce and swarm and raise queens, while the pollen flow is on and while the nectar flow is on, bees are motivated to raise queens. They do it eagerly. And those queens get the best nutrients. They get high quality, high protein pollens during this time. And they're very selective about the proteins they bring in. For all of the pine tree pollen out there, my bees aren't generally bringing that in. That's a last resort food item for them. They're going after the higher protein pollens. They let all that pine pollen go to the ground, right? So you're going to have your best fed queens. They're going to be the largest. And then when you move them to get them mated, they're going to mate quite well in this weather and this time of year. So there's a picture of one of the frames. It's not actually a very good frame, but in the background, you'll see the Queen Hotel there. And I want to talk about that hardware a little bit more in a moment. Oh, so here's the pot. So this is the Atlanta Allergy Clinic. They graft the pollen every day and they put it on a calendar. So there's March, April. I'll click on May here in a moment. The red days are the really high pollen count days. So as much as my sinuses really are not happy, the bees are, and they're bringing it in. If they're not bringing it in, it's because they have nectar, and they're bringing nectar in. Bees know what they need, and they know what to bring it in. And they give each other orders, marching orders. Don't bring any more pollen. I don't want that. They do that by when a bee brings in pollen, they'll just refuse to accept it and make her wait. And then eventually they'll take it. They've studied this. So I saw a newcomer on Facebook the other day said, my bees aren't bringing pollen in anymore. That's because they're bringing in the nectar. So anyway, there's April, and then May still decent, but it's really tapering off. And then June, it's pollen and nectar dearth again here in West Georgia. So we're getting up to the hardware. I want to talk about the Queen Hotel. I got two slides. I just inserted these today. So when I presented at the big conference in February, somebody said, what stops the queens? What stops inbreeding? And that's unrelated to this method, but here's what stops inbreeding. It's two things. The queen solves the problem in two ways. In general, the queen mates with about 15 drones. So she, if it's linear, she produces offspring from father number 1, father number 2 in rotation, then father number 15. That's important because inside of that colony in your hive is characteristics of each of those drones. Somewhat of an accident, right? She found 15 drones. I don't know how selective she is, but she's got 1 in 15. You know, I mean, there's 1/15 of a family of drone and her genetic makeup. So we think maybe that 15th of that box is good at bringing in nectar. They're very good at bringing in nectar, and they don't swarm much. So those are positive properties. The other one might be very good at producing drones and mating. So each of those 15 lineages in that box have some pros and some cons. And Keith Delaplane told us about an experiment that they did. I don't know that he did it, but he had studied it and read about it. They created, and this is why the genetic diversity here is so important. They've proven it. They've taken a queen and mated her artificially, inseminated her with 50 drones, and they ended up with a super colony. In other words, the negative traits were washed out by the positive traits of the 15 genetic makeups in that one colony. It's not that sustainable, but that's what breeders or the inseminators can do when they artificially inseminate queens. So the polyandry is very important. That prevents inbreeding. I occasionally add a queen from another part of the country, not far away, but I try not to buy them all from South Georgia, and certainly not from Florida. So she mates very well with the polyandry. And then the other method is recombination. So recombination, let's see, they've defined it here. It's crossing over. It occurs when sperm and egg cells are formed and segments of each are interchanged. So they're repairing missing pieces of genetic makeup. And that's the best explanation that I have. So that has an upside, and they figured this out. It also has a downside. So it's one of the two things that prevent inbreeding. And then one of the downsides is it leads to a gradual fixation of mutations. So if the bee has a problem, this method isn't perfectly clear at getting out, shaking free the mutations. So I still like the idea of adding a different bee, a different queen to my yard every few years, and don't just order the queens from the same place. I still think that's worthwhile. It's also fun just to get some different bees. Okay, good. This is my favorite part. Here's the Queen Hotel. My first one, it was in that first picture. It was loaned to me by my mentor, the guy that saved my bacon in my first month as a beginning beekeeper in 2013. He came out, he'd drill some holes in a deep and put corks in it and put these dividers, just had a table saw, put some top on it. I started modifying it, and you'll see those pictures here in a moment. So this is a deep, that's another deep, and this is a medium. I like the idea of the medium, but we started with a deep. I started with the one from the Dot. It was about $45, and they ship it assembled. That's kind of a bad thing. You'll see why. It's bulky, it's heavy, so you'll have a few promise. It'll pay itself back by the time you raise just 2 queens out of it. It has 4 compartments, and there's something very important I can tell you about each of those compartments. That's not 2 frames. That's like space in there for 2.5 frames. In fact, this is a deep that normally holds 10 frames, and it's only holding 8. So that's how much extra room you have between each of the 2 frames in each compartment. That space is very important because when you pull those frames out, you're going to have a queen cell on there, and you don't want to crush it. So if you build one, build it for 8. There are some that have 3 ways. You could do 9. But I really like the 4 compartment. And there, by the way, there's the entrance. There at the pointer. That's the entrance for the west wing. This is the entrance for the center wing. There's an entrance on the back, and there's an entrance on that side. That's a bottom board and a top board. I'll show you more closely. Anyway, I want you off of this page just to get the idea that buying one is very worthwhile. Building one's not challenging. The divider boards, they have to be thin. The reason is you want to preserve that extra bee space. And yeah, you'll get annoying comb in there. It's not that annoying for the price of raising nearly free queen bees. They propolize that in there real solid, but that's just MDF, medium density fiber board. It's available in the hobby area at the hardware stores. So this is the queen calendar, not my favorite one. It's really cool. It's just that wheel. It shows the stages. It shows when you can graft. I put that on there for fun, but this is my calendar. This is an Excel sheet. I didn't write it. I stole it off of Google. Somebody drew this. And so the idea is you can come in here and put today's date on today's day. And now you have a custom calendar on your clipboard, and you're going to mark it. And this is about how I mark mine. I used to mark it very closely. Like this is probably day 2, but it might be day 3 because I don't know how old the egg I put in there was. I'm not that concerned. I marked that I moved some frames over. The bees draw out a cell or several, and then down here it's capped, next Friday. That's a short span of time. And then I don't have to worry about when she hatches. Like so many of the other methods, she's going to hatch by herself. If there's 2 of them in there, they can do the fight to the death match. That's fine. But just 1, 2, 3, less than 3 weeks later, 16 days, you're going to have a virgin queen running around. And in my experience, in April and May, several days later, she'll be mated, and a couple days later, she'll be laying. And she's real calm after she gets mated and she's laying. She's busy. So here's the queen calendar. You guys have all seen this stuff before, but you just need to be able to see eggs. Learn to hold the frame up and see the eggs, and or put a flashlight in there. As long as you get eggs moved over, the bees will know what to do. I'm going to go into deeper detail about the method. So my favorite, easiest method is this. Go grab 2 frames, and to some reasonable degree, make sure the queen's not on there. It's not the end of the world if you move your queen. You'll see why in a moment. Just roll with the punches is what I'm telling you. If you move 2 frames over and they've got eggs, I like some cap brood too. They're going to hatch out and make me a big batch of nurse bees in there in just a few days. So, but I like to find everything on there. Keep the orientation the same. If you have pollen facing eggs over here, keep that orientation the same when you move those 2 frames over. Give them a little distance. Within 24 hours, they'll have a queen cell. And there's one there. They'll build one very quickly, and you can check it. Just gently pull that out. I've crushed a few queen cells in my 9 years, but don't worry about it. They're going to raise another one if you give them another batch of eggs. So that's it. Just move 2 frames over. If you've pulled a queen out, you can just move one frame over, or she'll leave behind some eggs. This method sustains itself through the summer several times, depending on how long you've left your queen in the hotel. So that's method one. There's some pictures of some of the frames. And there's the calendar. If you Google that, it'll pop up. If you email me that, I'll send that to you. Okay, so that's my favorite procedure. And I've done it in March. March is a little early. The hazard is you could have a cold night. I have froze a few bees doing that in March. I don't think I've started it earlier than March. It's something I would do though. But anyway, there's method one. Just move a pair of frames over. The foragers fly home. If you need to, shake extra bees in there. You want nurse bees in there. Method two is graft a queen cell. I don't have a lot of patience for this. For a while, I was running plastic frame too, and it's just really challenging to do. But if you find a queen cell on a frame, I like to just move the whole frame over. And if you want to, gently brush the bees off. Don't shake it. You'll damage the larvae or the queen. You could shake her out, but don't shake a queen cell ever. Or transport. Don't even attempt to transport a queen cell other than across your bee yard until she's been in there about 12 days or 13 days. Then she's sturdy enough to move. So they're sensitive to impact. Certainly shaking is a bad idea until day 12. So just brush off with a turkey feather or your brush, and you might not know, when she got capped or if she's due to be capped in a couple more days, but don't worry about it. Just move a queen cell over if you want to do that method. And then there's some more queen cells. There's one tied in with a piece of plastic. That's not my photo. I don't do a lot of queen cell moving without just moving the whole frame. So here's method three. This happened by accident. I promise you I didn't think, I'll do that. Just one time I moved the queen over and then I saw her and I was like, where'd you come from? There she was. I just left her. And it was kind of cool. She just started laying and creating spare parts for me. She was already really good at what she was doing. So I had her in there and I just let her establish a colony, a two frame colony. It was fun. In the meanwhile, where I stole her from, they started raising a queen for me over there. So see, it works out. And this is also far without cages, without capturing queens and putting her in a box and doing the release thing. So there's three methods. There's other variations. I've done punching and a little bit of grafting. Without trying to raise 10 cells, you can graft a little bit in here. You can do notching, punching, some of the other methods that I can't name. So what are you going to do with your new queen? This is the traditional method here to release a queen. It's a lot of work to me, but I've made peace with it to some degree. And I have some equipment that kind of helps me. I have a hard time holding the queen with my fingers. But anyway, so my preference is just to move the queen on two frames. That's what I do. All those foragers fly home. Maybe some of the nurse bees stay back there too. I'll give them some new frames and new eggs and let them raise another queen when I harvest a queen out of the queen hotel. So if you have too many queens towards the end of the summer, you can't overwinter in this box unless you're further south. And then even then, you just need to have forage. So in West Georgia, you can expect another nectar flow later. So all I'm addressing here on this slide is if you have a two frame colony and it turns September on you here in Georgia, you might squeeze in a laying queen into a 5 frame box and get her to, you're not going to try to draw a comb, but you might get her to lay and build a population. And they will do that, even though their instinct is not to do that. If you're feeding, you can draw out a 5 frame box in September, no later than that. And you're going to have down here the goldenrod. Okay, so of all the problems, I got slimed. I didn't have enough bees as a beginner, so I had a couple of frames get slimed. Totally nasty mess. But that doesn't happen to me anymore. I keep these colonies crowded, and one way to do that is get capped brood cells in there. But by and large, my most common problem is robbing, and certainly don't feed a stimulant and try to avoid feeding other than just a little bit at a time. I think I have a queen hotel colony that gets robbed almost every summer, and it's usually in the late summer when it's a nectar dearth And as a beekeeper, I should have moved them already. I'm just being lazy. So that's when they'll get robbed. It's not something that happens much, and I usually feel like it's my fault as a lazy beekeeper. So that's the most likely problem. You'll have small hive beetles in there, no big deal. Don't even think about protein patties in a two colony frame, in my opinion, in a 2-frame colony. They will get honey bound. So in April and May, they're certainly going to start making honey and capping it. So you can move it. You can move it to a box that you plan to harvest later. Keep the bees busy. Give them something to do. Give them another frame to draw or open already drawn comb. By the way, drawing comb can be problematic. They can draw weird comb with all that extra space around them, and so that's another problem: is weird comb and burr comb. No sweat. And then you can be an over inspector, but as a beginner, I would just say do it. There's nothing more educational in my experience as a beginner a few years ago than to have 2 nukes right on my back porch. I opened them every day, and I made every mistake I could on those 2 nukes. I didn't hurt them bad enough. They could always raise a new queen if I did something bad there. I have held a frame and just see the queen fly off. And I didn't worry about it. I said, they know what to do. Even as a beginner, I said, no sweat, just put her back in here. She'll come back or she won't. So, but over inspect, pick a box to over inspect, and maybe not the Queen Hotel. Let them, because they're a little fragile, especially at first. Is there a deadline for this? Maybe. In my part of the state, and just in my lazy approach, mid-July is the latest I would attempt to start a new queen. I think you can do it. The weather's good. You've got to feed. As far as establishing a colony, 5 or 10 or more frames, I think September is my deadline, without extremely heavy feeding, some artificial hive, really. Okay, this is my fun part, the modifications. My first Queen Hotel was loaned to me, and I got permission to start drilling it. And so that's where these ideas came from. And this is a stand. I'll talk about that in a moment. There's the bottom board, the deep, and it is just a deep with dividers in it. And then this thing I built called the attic, and then a telescoping top so that there's room. The attic, the purpose of it is not just to keep it warmer or cooler, but to have feeding jars inside. Okay, so the attic, I'm going to show you close-up photos of what that looks like. There's a drip line. The rain will fall here and drip out here. You'll see why in a moment. That's the lowest most point of that piece of wood due to the way I've cut it. So the rain comes down and doesn't try to get inside the colony. And that would encourage them to really propolize the box, to like seal it shut if you let the rain get in there. I've got quart jars in there. Let's look at, here we go. So there's without finish. So that's just a medium on top. And it does have the box joints, and that's okay. And then I'll show you a close-up of this. This is just 1x4 pond. It's white pond. It's very not free. It's like, it's hard to explain. It's kind of a hobby piece of wood. Very, very few knots. You don't want knots. You don't want warped wood here because you're going to be cutting it. There's a side view of the attic. It's the medium, and then the drip line, the surround, the drip line that I put on it. Okay, here's a bottom picture of that medium, and then you can see everything's very caulked. 2 coats of primer. I don't want water getting in there, So that's just a 45-degree cut. If you have a table saw, you can do that easily. If you have a friend that has a table saw, you can do the whole piece of wood that way, and then finish with a miter box. So there again is the medium, the 45-degree cut on the top. I want to point out this is very, very caulked right here with paintable caulk. And then there's a side view of how I cut the wood. So on a table saw, you would rip that whole length, just get a 8-foot piece of board and cut it at 45 degrees. And then do it again over here, 45 degrees here as well. Okay, so that's, and you can see how few knots are in that wood. So yeah, I think you're gonna have to have a table saw or access to one. Maybe Home Depot would cut it. I kind of doubt it. And then the rest of it can be done with a miter box. Okay, so Modification number 2, feeding. This is where we drill holes. Let's advance this slide. Okay, there's the telescoping top off, and there's the 4 compartments. You'll see I've numbered those because I kept notes. I kept colony number 1 in here, so I had notes just on that colony. I kept notes and calendars. I don't do that anymore. I'm very confident with just letting the bees be. But as a beginner, I kept a lot of notes. So there's one piece of wood, and I'll show you the right it's a 2.75-inch hole, and I finally bought a good one. And then I'll show you what I do to make, and I didn't invent this. My mentor showed this to me. There's a close-up of just one of the compartment tops, lifted up and flipped over. And then here's, let me back up. So this piece of wood here, here's a close-up of it. The backside, the inside, I put a piece of number 8. That's 8 squares per inch hardware cloth on the backside with a stapler. Lots of staples, not long staples. And I put a few extras. And the reason for that is this piece of wood is kind of thick. It's thicker than a mason jar lid. And so I wanted to kind of bell the piece of wire up. And I just did that with a hammer. Once I stapled that down, I hammered it. And when they propolize it, I have cleaned it with a torch. I don't recommend it. I recommend a hair dryer or a hot air gun if you happen to have one. But that's all you need. You just need a little heat, and that stuff will drop right out of that screen. This one I've burned the screen on. So I said 1/4 inch here. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's number 8. The bees can't pass through it. And now when I come back and feed these bees, I can have my shorts on. I can annoy them or not. I don't have to care because they're not coming through that screen. Okay, there's the saw. That's one of the better ones. They cost a little more, but they don't grab in the wood and try to jerk the drill out of your hand and hurt your hand or hurt your arm. So feeding, light syrup is great here. Maybe in the colder weather, heavy syrup. But the light syrup helps them draw comb. Hopefully they're not drawing comb. You have some drawn comb. And no feeding stimulants whatsoever. Ask me how I know. Ventilation, this is totally unnecessary, but I did do one of my boxes. I had the number 8 screen on the inside. This is the bottom side of the deep, by the way. So I had the bottom side, and I just put, so I put it in there too partially if water got in, the water could drain out. But this is unnecessary. You don't need these holes. I did leave one of these colonies open one day and it rained in it. The water will still come out. This is just unnecessary. But if you were further south, maybe you would, especially if you had a weak colony here, you might decide that ventilation is worthwhile. So modification number 4 is 1 piece. I do this with my nukes. I do this with my nukes because I carry them around at times. I move and manipulate stuff. To me, that's a lot of fun. I'm just a busybody with the colonies when I'm equalizing the colonies. Or helping a new beekeeper out by robbing one of my nukes. So my Dodont vendor box showed up cracked. There's the crack right there, and I didn't want to send it back. It just wasn't worth it. So I epoxied the crack, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll just glue the bottom board on. So that whole bottom board is epoxied to the deep. And I've also, it's probably unnecessary, but I drilled a couple of holes and put some long screws in there and made sure the screws went up into the deep a little bit. And just got some purchase on the wood, and the screws are recessed. Probably unnecessary if you're using epoxy. I thought it was worthwhile. And when I pull this out of the storage every spring, it's 1 piece. I carry it out. This is before I painted it. The divider boards are missing. If you decide to build one, these are the joints you might find preferable. I think that might be a rabbet joint. Anyway, that's a joint you can do on a table saw. So this is the joints that Dodont chose to use, and those are just stapled together. When you've got that type of joint, you don't want to try to put a nail or screw. You're just going to put glue and then staples, and the glue will do all the work once it cures. And then you're going to have to rip the guides here. So this is outside of the scope of this slide, but if you're going to take a deep that you already have, it's going to be a challenge to cut those grooves. You might be able to do it. So I drew a line there so you can see there's the entrance. Right there, it's just a tiny little hole, and it comes as 2 pieces. I prefer it as 1 piece. There's another photo of it. The hive stand is way overkill, but it was sitting on the edge of my driveway. I had these materials sitting around, and I built this very heavy base. I actually kind of like it. It saves my back a little bit. I don't have to bend over as much to fish around into the Queen Hotel or maybe pry out some of the frames. Cinder blocks is fun. I like a little bit higher stand for my back. In fact, I've got stands that are knee high, and I have friends that don't like it, but I like it. It just saves my back a little bit. So build whatever kind of stand you want. I won't drag you through the details here. I will tell you, if you're playing around with decks, this is a UV Cure deck sealant I started using about 10 years ago. It's UV Cure. After it UV cures, it's dry to the touch. It's not oily like Thompson's. I like using it around bees. It is expensive, but there's the brand name. Bonds one time. I'm hooked on it. And that stuff lasts 10 years easily. It does start to weather with a little bit of patina, but it always still looks quite good. My beehives are all level, or they're tilted a little bit for drainage. And then just here's a list of the hole saw, the other tools you'll need if you want to do some modifications. I really like doing light bee work. I don't build hives or anything, but I like to build feeders and modify the stuff I have. So the materials I use are real good paint and good primer and paintable caulk and the usual stuff, a box of deck screws. I can do a lot with this list right here. I don't sand everything except just real quickly to get paint to it here. So in 9 years, I've built a ton of bee boxes, and it's part of the fun, I think. So this just happens to be my queen rearing tools and supplies, my favorite list. This is a clip that lets attendants in and out, and you can put that in your shirt pocket. And if you see a queen, you can scoop her up real quick. In my case, without worrying about crushing her. And this won't crush her unless you're just really sloppy with it. This will hold her in, and then you can stick her back in the pocket. And it's metal. They make a plastic. It looks like a hair clip, right? But this one's probably from Rossmann, and all the vendors have it. They have plastic ones too, and the attendants can go in and out. And this is when I'm moving the queen. I think you could use this. It's under some circumstances as a queen release cage. Just bear in mind that other bees can get in there to your new queen, so that's not its intention. Let's show you. So I have this little tool. Hopefully you don't need it. I needed it my first year. I just had a hard time holding the queens. There's the paint colors that you surely know about. Maybe it's not the best paint in the world, but it's decent. And there's my favorite marking cage. I don't have to try to hold the queen. If I see her across the comb, I just put this on top of her until I learn better to hold one by the wings, like Michael Palmer does it. He calls it built-in handles, until I get a little practice there. So this will just pin her down. She can still move around. Get your pin ready, and then push this slightly further in, and it'll hold her while you mark her. And I don't let it dry. I just turn her loose right after that. I do not put a lot of paint on her either. So there's the first queen hotel that was loaned to me, and then a couple of my nukes in the background, and a log deer that I made. So that was in 2013, so many years ago. And that was the birthplace of my modifications on the Queen Hotel, the commercially available Queen Hotel. So while I'm telling you Queen Hotel, if you go to YouTube, you'll learn about a thing called a Queen Castle. And there's a gentleman on there, he's passed away. His name is Billy Davis. What he was doing is very different. That's a commercial beekeeping circumstance. And what he's doing is manipulating the frames. He has a queen excluder and some other methods that he uses to manufacture a frame of nothing but 3-day or younger eggs. He's a grafter. He carries that up to his shop, and he grafts probably hundreds of cells up there. And actually, he's a volunteer in that operation. But it's just very interesting to watch him talk. So if you have a notepad, just write down Billy Davis, Queen Castle. Anyway, this is the Queen Hotel, and thank you for attending. And I hope it was fun for you. And I can take questions. We can also go back to a slide if you need to. So I think you can unmute yourself, and any questions welcome.
Great. I've got a question I'll start off with, and I'll go to the chat box here. Uh,
Cool.
how long does it take a queen to lay up a frame? If you've got her out in a hotel there with just two frames, does she immediately start laying full blast, or does she kind of ramp her way up? And about how long would it take to fill up a frame?
A virgin queen.
One that you have just mated, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have always been optimistic, and I have high hopes that I'll have a laying queen in 24 days, and it has happened. So from the time I put an egg in there to 24 days, and then I've had sketchy spotty queens. I actually, in my third or fourth year, I finally got the courage to pinch a queen and just pinch her head off, and then just leave the colony to solve that, and that worked out great. So I got a little courage now. I have raised some runts, and just out of good sport, I'll let the runts try. You just never know. But as far as just doing that football laying pattern, I think my bees see some competition. But anyway, I love that when it happens. I want to say what I've read is that a queen can lay 2,000 eggs a day. Now, do they do that? In other words, do the bees let her do that? She's going to go wide open if she has food. And in April and May, and the first week of June, maybe here, March, April, May, that's 12 weeks. The queens in this box, they will lay wide open, and you'll see her pattern. And then she'll slow down later after she stuffs the box. So when I leave these boxes sitting all summer, it's right on my driveway. It's where my wife parks. They'll get a little annoying in your face, not aggressive, just annoying, because that's a flight path. And they'll be bearding, and they will overpopulate the box. So they're very successful. The virgin queens mate, especially in March, April, and May. They're very successful, and that's all about nutrition in West Georgia.
Next question, I believe you answered. I'll let you repeat it. I think she asked it before you showed the feeding holes. What method do you use to feed the queen hotel?
To feed it?
Yes.
Oh, just the jars in the top. So just like syrup. And then if they get honey bound, I mean, try not to let that happen. It's not the end of the world. So yeah, just sugar syrup. So here's the pointer. That top box comes off. The quart jars come out. The quart jars have, I used to drill them full of holes, but now I only put about 4 holes in the top because I really want to slow down the rate at which that syrup goes into the colony. I'll do that in March too. If I want to feed a colony real fast, I'll use one of the hive top feeders. They can take a gallon in a day like that. So a pint jar or a quart jar, just the 2 or 3 or 4 holes. They know what to do with it. No problems. Just no feeding stimulants.
Which leads to our next question. Somebody said, why no feeding stimulants?
Oh, robbing. Yeah. So honeybee, healthy honeybee, what's it called? HBH. Right. The nickname is honeybee robber, right? I started making my own. I love the smell of it. I'm experienced enough now. I don't use it much. It becomes a crutch. And if I have bees that aren't eating, maybe there's something wrong. Maybe I need to manipulate and build that colony stronger. It's useful. When is it useful? Honeybee healthy, it seems to have its place, right? But especially as a beginner, and you just love seeing them take the feed, and you think you're doing them a favor, but you're kind of putting them at risk. As soon as the smell of that gets out to the neighbors, your other colonies, they're all over that box. So you can't feed it in here. And then now the bee has the problem of putting that away, and there's no way to hide it. It smells so strong. So if you use honeybee healthy, another strategy is if you feel the need to use it to encourage a hive or a colony to take feed and develop and gain weight, mix it weaker than what it says on the bottle, or just buy one thing like lemongrass and mix it really weak. I walk past my refrigerator in the garage and I still smell it when I used it as a beginner.
I made a trip and bought some Swarm Commander the other day, and my car still smells that like that.
Oh, really?
That smell, yeah. And I don't think it leaked, but
Yeah.
it does. Um,
Oh,
Same
they
person.
follow the swarm commander?
Beg your
Yeah.
pardon?
They follow the swarm commander? You spray it in a box and they'll come after it?
I've found that it helps with swarms. If one way, if I've got just an open swarm and I put a frame of drawn comb up, if I spray it on it, they're
Yeah.
I think they'd walk onto it anyway, but they're more apt to
Yeah.
walk onto it.
Yeah.
The same viewer asks, are essential oils good for the bees if they're already in a store-bought feeding supplement?
I may not have the answer to that. It's never been clear to me that the stimulants are actually. As a beginner, I saw all kinds of videos where people were purporting a medicinal value to the feeding stimulant or the essential oil, and it's never been clear to me that that is either a medicine or a nutrient. And I'm happy to be wrong about that, but I've never regarded it as an essential nutrient to the bee. At the same time, I know that, processed sugar, it sounds like a bad idea, right? We're also steered away from, natural sugars or molasses. They have so many solids in them. They don't resemble nectar in any way. So they're real heavy on the bee stomach and they get the dysentery from that. So those are just hard lessons for a beginner to think, wait, I'm feeding them white sugar? That's bad for me, but it's good for bees. And the remainder of their nutrition comes from good pollen, not pollen substitute, but actual pollen that has a high protein content to it. And pollens are ranked. You can Google and find out what better pollens are in your area. I don't really know the answer, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Is the honeybee healthy a nutrient? And I honestly think that it is not.
Okay. Had two different people ask the same question. What size entrance hole do you use on the Queen hotels?
Um, so my buddy drilled that in the photo there. That's large. That's large enough for a champagne bottle cork or a wine bottle cork. So that must be about a half an inch, and they can guard that. And if you had to transport it, you could staple screen over that. So I'm going to take a guess that that's around a half an inch, and a half an inch. I need a ruler.
1 inch is a rather large hole, so I think
It
that works.
is, yeah. So I'm just holding the gauge here, and it's larger than a half inch. I'm going to go with 3/4, and you can measure a wine cork next time you have some wine, and that's the diameter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Please compare the Queen Hotel with a two-frame nuke. I guess it's more than just the fact that you've got 3 or 4 two-frame nukes side by side.
Yeah, it's not. That's the efficiency of this one box that I can set out and put away. The colonies are so small, they don't mind being in that proximity with each other. They have 4 entrances, north, south, east, and west. The one thing I can think of in colder environments is that they may help each other stay warm, and that's just my own suspicion. I've never heard anyone say it. They certainly can't overwinter in this unless you were just farther south and kept them fed. So I actually want to say that there's no honest hard advantage to having, in this case, this is a 3 colony. He may have 3 frames in each of these. I can't remember, but that's a 3 colony thing. They look nice. They look like they look a little, I've got pictures of beehives from France and they're just beautiful. And I know some people have the gabled roofs, the copper roofs. I just think that the Queen Hotel looks nice in the yard. And mine's right on the driveway, right next to that log deer.
I don't have a log deer, but I do have a swarm trap full of bees right now on my driveway.
Oh, that's fun.
I
Yeah.
think you
We
got a
keep
twofer there.
these on the porch too. Yeah.
It keeps the postman honest.
Yeah. Oh, they tiptoe past it.
I think you got a twofer. I think you actually answered the next question. It was, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using the Queen Hotel versus a two-frame standalone nuke? That would be the heating for one, and then taking up less space if you have 3 of them versus the 2 frames.
Well, here's what's funny. I run 2 4-compartment Queen Hotels. I have 2 of them. I usually run 1, but I had 2, and I ran 2, and I still wanted to put some 2-frame nukes all over the yard.
That's me. I have about 20 of them right now.
Yeah, they're just so cool. I love seeing them on the porch or wherever. So I really like the 5 frames because they will overwinter just great. In the back, you can see I have a 2 deep 5 frame, and you can't see it, but well, maybe it's not there, but I have a hive feeder. It's a box, a real fast feeder on the top. I can fatten up a 5 frame nuke in October and November, and they're ready for winter real fast on drawn comb already. So I'm a real 5 frame fan. You can do a lot with a 5 frame nuke, a lot. No magic in 2 frames. It really isn't, but it's just space efficient. There's 4 colonies right there in that one box, and they love being crowded. Oh, there's an advantage. Bees do like being crowded in terms of defending that space, in terms of managing and patrolling for small hive beetles and moths and ants. The crowdedness is very good for honeybees.
Before I
That's a
get back
little
to that,
anecdotal, but it's my observation, and many others have observed that they love being crowded.
that does stimulate them.
Yeah,
Um, I've got a question before I get back to the chat box again. Our club here used to, we've gotten away from it, but in past years, we were strictly medium frame bee clubs.
yeah,
We wouldn't use deeps. I don't know if there's any queen castles made for mediums, but would that
yeah,
speed things up? Um,
yeah, yeah. Yes, and in fact, I've even had the notion to imagine shallow. I'll tell you why. Well, yeah. So there's a guy in South Carolina that sells the medium.
mhm.
I'm sorry, I don't know what frame it's on, but I think the medium's a real good idea, and the shallow is not a crazy idea, because a lot of times I'm in my shallows and I find brood or queen cells that I want to move, and I just move them. If they're in a deep, they'll draw a weird comb. I don't care. So the deep will do whatever you want. I actually think the medium would be fine. In this part of the state, the medium would probably get honey bound.
Yeah,
But
I
if you're
feel that.
manipulating that, anyway, the medium's absolutely a good idea.
Great. Um, and totally different, but you're an engineer. Is the 2.75-inch hole saw, is that the same as the 70G? I think those lids are called 70G on a quart or a pint mason jar, the standard mason.
Oh, I don't know. This fits the mason jar. I would have to Google 70G.
Okay. All right. Well, we can do that. We don't have to have you to do that for us.
Yeah.
Next question is, what do you think of the Nicot rearing system?
Oh, I have one. It's part of my arsenal I experiment in. It gets criticism. It's probably some unnecessary hardware, but I actually really like it, and have had some success with it. You have the little cups, and I've also made my own wax cups, and that was tedious. But the Nico system certainly works, and the idea is that it guarantees you'll get eggs that are 3 days or younger, and they're already in a cup. So you're just spending a little money, and I think maybe especially for someone that has a hard time grafting just due to eyesight or steady hand, that's what drew me to it. Just knowing that as I get older, a system like that is kind of cheating, but it kind of makes it possible for you to do some grafting basically without grafting.
Yeah, those are interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure there's a question here, but I'm going to read this and hope that there is.
Uh-huh.
I've raised queens from swarm cells in queen hotels, but I've never let them start from eggs because of the concern there weren't enough bees to adequately feed the larval queen,
Yeah.
resulting in an inferior queen. Oh, yeah, here's a question. Perhaps these could be the runts that you mentioned?
Maybe. Well, runts happen no matter what. But if you don't have enough nurse bees, that's easy to fix. Just go to a frame, go back to the queen hotel, shake nurse bees in. So that's one of many manipulations that beginners, need to learn. And it's sort of obvious, but it's not. Usually you need a beekeeper to tell you to do that. It's happened to me. I've moved 2 frames over, and for whatever reason, I didn't get anybody to stay in there. So I went back to the colony the next day and brought 2 frames over of nurse bees and shook them real good, and that fixed it.
Awesome. Awesome. Um,
And they can be nurse bees from another colony, really. When you're manipulating, you can kind of break the rules a little. You might briefly see fighting if you combine bees, but you're not worried about anything happening to your queen. It's possible they could do something to the queen cell. I think the risk is pretty low. It's fun to be aggressive and assertive with your bees and try to make them do what you want them to do, if that includes cheating a little bit. So I have, combined frames from 2 different colonies, even without any real problems.
I'll never forget. Was buying bees from Jeff Dayton. We mentioned him earlier, and
Yeah.
he had an observation hive in his bee shed, and he called it the glass hive. And
Yeah.
He said he was always trying to find a crappy queen. He used a more colorful word for that observation hive, so they wouldn't be swarming out of there.
Oh, yeah.
An observation hive is a good use for a crappy queen.
Yeah, I never thought about it.
Can I just use a 5-frame nuke box and split it in 2 with a divider?
Let's see. Yes, put a thin divider in the medium. Well, they're going to both be using the same entrance, right? So what I've done to close entrances on a 5-frame nuke, 2 things: glue the bottom board in, and then take a piece of molding and completely enclose that front. And now what you can do is an entrance on the back and an entrance on the front.
Drill
with
the
a
hole.
hole. Yeah, have fun with it. I love hacking up bee boxes, but if you want to make 2-frame nukes with a 5-frame box, that'll absolutely work. Make sure you use thin MDF board in the center, and you're gonna have to cut grooves somehow in those boards. Hopefully you're doing this before you assemble the nuke. If you've got a trick or a little circular saw, some sort of saw that'll get it there and cut those grooves for that divider, that's great. But you see now all the different pieces that have to go together there.
Yeah. And Angela, if you remember Martin Kotar, he actually built one of those for me, and that's how he did it.
Yeah.
And that is the problem with the entrances both being on the same side.
Yeah, I have several nukes that have the wheel on the front, and those are fun. That'll let you control where they go as well.
Comment here: wine corks are about 25 millimeters or 1 inch. So we
Cool.
got that close. Do you have any experience
Sounds about
introducing the 2 frames directly into a queenless colony?
I've done it. The lucky thing is if you maintain 4 or 8 or 10 hives, you can cut a lot of corners and get away with it. Introducing 2 frames into a queenless colony, you would probably have to put her in a release cage and introduce her properly, unless you're just taking a chance and experimenting and seeing what will happen. Another technique is the newspaper combine. I don't see how it would work there necessarily, but I can imagine some ways to make that work.
Question: I'm a beginner. What is weird comb and how do you spot it?
Oh, so ladder comb is the comb that they'll build in the bottom box and they'll connect to frame in the top box. So when you lift the top box off and twist it a little bit, and hopefully don't hurt your back, that breaks that ladder comb off. And it's good to go ahead and scrape it off. Weird comb is just burr comb, and you'll spot it. It'll be in your way, and you could scrape it off. So burr comb is comb wherever they put that's not on a frame, and it bothers you. That's burr comb. If it doesn't bother you, don't bother it. My problem with not scraping some comb off is I'll crush bees when I put it all back together.
Someone's mentioned here that Miller Bee Supply does make medium queen hotels. I think they're out of North Carolina.
It's a great choice, the medium.
And I may have one. I remember my third year, I went to the convention and bought like 3 of the queen hotels, and I've yet to use them, but I'm going to break them in this year.
Oh, they're fun. Yeah. And and Miller's a great supplier.
In the fall, do you move the bees that are in the hotel into 5-frame nukes? And if so, when and do you feed?
I would probably do it in July or August if I could. If you're in the mountains, especially by the time it's fall, like late September, it's getting late. If you do move things late, at least give them drawn comb and prepare to feed. So what you're asking will work with those precautions. You're going to need to feed, and don't expect them to draw comb from foundation in a short period of time, if you can help it.
And Bill's asked a second part to that. It says, would it be okay to give them a frame of capped honey?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Some of the beekeepers keep honey in the freezer. I haven't started doing that, but that would be a rich reward for a colony of bees, real honey.
Tom, we'll go ahead and thank Barry for sharing his time with us this evening. I really enjoyed it. Okay, I do have a couple more questions. Can hives be painted with the Kills brand paint?
That's what I use. I use the Kills primer,
Okay.
and I've been accused of having some relationship with Martha Stewart because my boxes are so beautiful. So my secret sauce is caulk, paintable caulk, primer, real fast, real fast sanding. Don't go crazy, just scuff it, and then 2 coats of Sherwin-Williams 35-year paint. And
And
if you're
somebody,
if you're
somebody,
really into it, you don't roll it. Put it on with a brush.
yeah,
I have rolled it. Rolling's fine. It leaves a texture. And I started out using a satin, but I've graduated to gloss. It'll be easier to clean.
that's exactly what I've heard. That gloss was best,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so many beekeepers just buy mistinted paint, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
buy the mistinted good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. I like the
Purple
paint and the caulk to protect the wood. I had in my 10 years, I've had one bottom board rot out, just one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's the Sherwin-Williams. That paint's expensive. But it happens to be the same paint as the house. So my hives match the house, and that oddly enough is green. My colonies are not white; they're green. If I had my way, I'd paint them camo so people don't notice them.
That's I had a Bob Benny video talks about what to paint, and I think he said use a 1 coat of oil-based primer and 2 coats of acrylic enamel latex, which I didn't think there was such a thing, but
Yeah. So he's putting latex over oil base.
yes, and says it holds up for forever.
Interesting.
One more question here. It says you raise these queens, then how do you use them? I think start new colonies.
Yeah, and I've actually during my working towards my journeyman certificate, doing public service, I gave so many bees away, and they were like children to me. If my new beekeeper friend, let them die that year or the next year, I was hurt by that. But I did my best to support them and encourage them and say, look, you need 2 colonies, you need 4 colonies, and you need to start doing splits now, artificial swarms. So yeah, I gave a lot of bees away on 2 frames, and the only thing I asked in return was 2 foundation frames, preferably wax. But yeah, I really like just to move 2 frames over. I'm the lazy beekeeper. And yes, I have put them in there in a weak colony. A weak colony won't bother them. There's not enough of them. So that works. That works without messing with the release cages and stuff.
Awesome.
And,
A
and you
follow up.
can yeah, you can requeen. Crush the queen you have already.
Yeah.
And that's real good to do late in the summer, honestly, and get a new queen in there, paint her for the right color so you can know when you see her next year if that's her or not. Yeah, you can absolutely requeen. And that was the picture of the big muff that I showed you, me putting the bees in the little box. That was the purpose of that muff, was to do a proper release in a release cage. Very worthwhile to requeen.
Yeah, you don't want a queen flying off. And I noted you expanded on that a little bit at the Georgia Beekeepers. And I meant to ask you about that. Thank you for thinking about that. Oh, well,
Thanks for the great turnout and for all the questions.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Very, very good presentation. Thank you so much, Barry.
Thanks. Thank you. And you're welcome. And for the person that asked about the nutritional value of the stimulants, I'll go look at that. Typically, the companies that sell the stimulants also feed something that has aminos or other nutritional content in it. So that might be your answer right there. They're selling both of the items. And I do dabble in nutrients, the super the little bottles of super stuff that helps your bees. I think that some of that stuff has a lot of value to prevent some of the parasites that bees have in their digestive tract. Oh,
And
let me blurt this out. Earlier last year, the University of Florida went through a study and they found out, this was the biggest news in my 10 years as a beekeeper, that the mites are not drawing the hemolymph or the blood of the bee out. They're feeding on the fat bodies of the bee.
correct, Samuel Ramsey. We had
Yeah.
him.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we had him. He was, I guess, our biggest name so far.
That is cool.
He was a fantastic speaker.
Yeah, I ended up on their website at the University of Florida. One day I want to go by there. I think it's in Gainesville, but man, that's a big fun. It's a big fun. It's a big they are really overlooked what the mites were doing. It's really kind of crazy how that happened.
That was his doctoral dissertation, and he's
Wow.
now in Thailand studying a newer threat that makes Varroa look like a piece of cake.
Wow.
I can't ever say it. It's
Yeah.
Triprolalops.
Oh yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's someone's wanting to know what size paint pen you use.
Oh, just those Poco. Anyway, the most important thing is don't worry about. Oh, you're asking if it's 1 millimeter or 5 millimeter. I think I bought the fat ones. That must be several millimeters. But they were sold through like Rossmann as a kit. So Rossmann made that choice for me. Anyway, that's not the problem. The size of the tip is not what you need to worry about. I'll keep this short. When you get that pin out and you shake it and you open it, the first thing you need to do before you mark a queen is touch a piece of trash or a leaf or the sole of your boot or whatever and draw most of that paint off, then mark your queen. Otherwise, you'll flood the queen with paint.
Yeah, that's the Posca pen. I just happen to have a set right
Yeah.
here. And
They get some criticism. There's some better pens than that now, I think, or just the tester modeling paint.
And Joe again says, can you detail how to use these queens to requeen a colony? I think you said you just pinch and you would slowly introduce them, maybe in a cage. You said.
Yeah, rule one: if you think it's queenless, you could be wrong. Go make sure. You could have a queen that's just not laying. So do your best, and then yeah, just put your queen into a release cage. If there's cells already, maybe you'll want to crush those or put those back over in your queen hotel. But if you're requeening a weaker colony, you should be successful. They'll be happy to have her. And the whole business about a laying worker is very rare, actually. So you don't have to worry about that. I've never seen a laying worker, and I've had colonies sit queenless for very long periods of time. I'm embarrassed to say. So beginners get very worried about the laying worker thing, and it's actually pretty unusual.
Yeah. Well, I love these how-to presentations. I mean, we have to go with it's hard to get some of the commercial guys to speak during
Yeah.
the season. They're more apt to speak in the winter, and these how-to
Yeah.
presentations are just, they really are the bee's knees. I really got a lot of comments about how
And you guys have drawn a great set. Not referring to myself, but the other guys there, Michael Palmer and the speaker related to the mite research. You guys have done a really good job. I can't help but think that the pandemic has been kind of good for that.
it has been. It's been a boon to our club.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
had Randy Oliver with Scientific Beekeeping on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's smart. And the Georgia Beekeepers Association, they did grants to a lot of the clubs down here, which included a tablet or a laptop and a camera and a Zoom account. So they've really pushed the clubs, financially to help get the clubs through this year, right?
Mhm. Yeah, our state association held its first Zoom. They kind of took off on our idea, and
Yeah.
last month, and I believe they're going to do one every month too.
Yeah.
It has been
Everybody's
good.
adopted it very well, I think.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Again, thank you, and
Thanks, Chip.
I will end the recording again now. I had to
Cool.
start it back.
Thanks for the turnout, everyone. It was great. This is my biggest crowd.
Unmute yourselves and give Barry a hand for his presentation.
Hey, Well, thank you, and the turnout, and it's a lot of fun. I hope you'll dabble with queen rearing. If you just have a box you dedicate to the purpose, you can then go play with notching. My newest toy I bought is a notching tool, and it came from UK. It came from Britain, I guess, and I need to get it out next. Start playing with it.
Well, great. Well, thank you everyone for attending. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, I'll sign out and thank everyone again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.